It all started on a quiet Thursday morning, one of those days where everything seems perfectly normal, until it isn't. I remember stepping outside with my coffee, thinking about how peaceful the neighborhood looked under the warm sunlight. Birds were chirping, sprinklers were running, and for once, it felt like our street had finally found some calm after weeks of HOA drama. But that peace didn't last long. By noon, my name was being whispered across the neighborhood like I was some sort of cyber criminal. The HOA group chat had exploded overnight. Someone had leaked a pile of private HOA emails, messages that exposed petty arguments, secret votes, and even a few embarrassing comments made by board members about certain homeowners. It was chaos, and by mid-morning, the finger of blame was pointed directly at me. I didn't even know about the leak until Karen, my next-door neighbor and self-proclaimed eyes of the community, stormed across my driveway, waving her phone and announcing to anyone who would listen that I was the one who did it. She said I had a tech background, that I always questioned the HOA decisions, and that I had a motive for revenge. It was absurd, but in this neighborhood, once Karen started a rumor, it spread like wildfire. By the afternoon, the president of the HOA had sent out a formal notice saying an investigation was underway. Some neighbors stopped talking to me. Others avoided eye contact when I walked by. My peaceful suburban life had turned into a public trial without a judge or jury, just whispers and assumptions. That night, as I sat in my home office scrolling through the leaked emails myself, I couldn't help but notice something strange. The files weren't hacked. They were screenshots, real, unfiltered screenshots of the email inbox. Someone hadn't broken into the system. They had accessed it directly. That detail changed everything for me. It meant the leak came from someone inside the HOA, not an outsider like me. But try explaining that to Karen. She had already gone full detective mode. I saw her pacing the sidewalk at night, talking to other neighbors, even snapping pictures of my Wi-Fi router through the fence like she thought she'd catch me mid-hack. She loved attention, and this scandal gave her exactly that. A spotlight. Still, I couldn't just sit back and let her ruin my reputation. I knew I had to find proof that I wasn't the one who leaked those emails, so I started digging a little myself. The next day, I reached out to one of the HOA board members I still trusted, an older gentleman named Frank, who had always been fair to me. He quietly mentioned that their email system had been accessed multiple times from the same IP address, one that belonged to someone living on our very street. That was my first clue. It wasn't long before I noticed something else. Karen's teenage son, Tyler, had been acting off. He was always in his garage, glued to his computer. I'd seen him on his phone at all hours, sneaking glances at my house whenever he passed by. He was smart, too smart for his own good sometimes, and suddenly a thought crossed my mind that made everything click. What if he was behind it? The theory made sense. Karen had access to some of the HOA accounts through her volunteer position, which handled newsletters and resident communication. If Tyler had her login or even seen her password, he could have accessed those emails easily, and knowing how nosy Karen was, maybe she even encouraged it without realizing how serious it was. Still, I needed proof, so I waited. I kept an eye on their house, noticing every time Tyler came home from school or disappeared into the garage. I knew something was going on in there. One evening, while taking out the trash, I heard Karen's voice through the open garage window. She was bragging to another neighbor that the truth would come out soon and that I'd get what's coming. Behind her voice, I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard, fast, deliberate, almost like someone was coding. That was the moment I knew I wasn't wrong. But the question was, how could I expose it without making things worse? As the HOA investigation deepened, Karen became more confident. She started pushing for a formal disciplinary meeting. Flyers appeared on mailboxes, reminding everyone that cybercrimes were serious and could result in legal action. She even cornered my mail carrier, warning them not to deliver suspicious packages to my address. I had to find a way to stop her before she destroyed my name completely. And then, one night, opportunity came knocking, quite literally. It was around 11 p.m. when I heard faint whispers coming from outside my side window. I peeked out, and to my surprise, I saw Karen's son, Tyler, sneaking into my yard with his phone flashlight on. He wasn't alone. He was carrying a small USB stick in one hand. I froze, watching from behind the blinds. What was he doing? He went straight to the electrical box near my garage wall, crouched, and plugged something in. It looked like he was trying to access my home Wi-Fi or router system. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. He wasn't just curious, he was trying to plant something. Suddenly, I knew what Karen's next move would be. She wasn't just accusing me, she was about to frame me. And before I could act, the lights from her porch flicked on, and she called his name quietly from across the yard, telling him to hurry up. That night I didn't sleep at all, because I knew without a doubt that this was just the beginning. The next morning, everything changed. Karen's evidence appeared in the HOA chat. Screenshots of logs and files supposedly showing my Wi-Fi connected to the HOA email system. It was fake, of course, but convincing enough to make people question me even more. But what Karen didn't know was that I had caught her son on camera. Because the same night Tyler tried sneaking around my yard, my security cameras had recorded everything. Every move, every whisper, every second of him tampering near my property. I didn't say anything just yet, not until I had everything I needed. Because if Karen wanted to play dirty, I was going to show her just how badly she'd underestimated me. And the real storm was about to begin. The next morning, the air in the neighborhood felt heavier than usual. It wasn't the kind of silence that came with peace. It was the kind that came before a storm. I could feel it from the moment I stepped outside. Neighbors who once waved now kept their heads down. The mailboxes seemed to whisper rumors, and in the center of it all stood Karen, arms folded, smiling like she'd already won. Her son had done his part. The fake evidence she'd leaked into the HOA group chat was spreading faster than truth ever could. She claimed she'd found traces of my home network connected to the HOA database, that I had hacked into the board's emails and stolen private information. To most people, it looked believable. A few lines of code, some highlighted text, and my name conveniently attached to it. By noon, the HOA had scheduled an emergency meeting for the weekend, and I knew exactly what that meant. A public humiliation session disguised as community accountability. But what Karen didn't realize was that while she was busy plotting her little digital takedown, I had been preparing something much bigger. I spent that entire day reviewing my security footage. The motion sensor camera by my garage had captured everything. Tyler sneaking into my yard, plugging a USB into my network box, and then leaving just minutes later when Karen called him back. It was clear as day, his face, his movements, even the small smirk when he thought no one could see him. That single piece of footage was worth more than any fake evidence they could throw at me. But I didn't stop there. I decided to dig deeper, not just to prove my innocence, but to uncover what exactly Tyler had done. When I checked my router logs, I found traces of an unauthorized device connecting right around the same time he'd been outside. It wasn't a random hacker or a distant signal. It came from their exact house. The connection lasted a few minutes, just enough to upload something or maybe even redirect data. At that point, I realized the full scope of what Karen was trying to do. She wasn't just trying to accuse me, she was trying to build a fake trail that made it look like I was the one behind the leaks. Her son's little late-night stunt wasn't curiosity, it was evidence planting. But the irony? The same stunt gave me everything I needed to destroy their plan. I decided to stay quiet. No confrontation, no angry messages, just calm observation. I wanted Karen to dig her own grave, one accusation at a time. Over the next couple of days, she made sure everyone in the neighborhood knew about the meeting. She talked to anyone who would listen. At the mailbox, by the park, even outside the coffee shop. Every conversation started with her saying, "You won't believe what he did." She loved the attention, feeding off the drama like it was oxygen. Meanwhile, her son started avoiding me completely. He couldn't even look in my direction anymore. Every time I passed their house, I saw him through the blinds, sitting at his computer, eyes darting nervously. Guilt has a way of showing itself even through glass. By the time Saturday arrived, the tension had reached its peak. The HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, that same beige building where people argued about lawn heights and mailbox paint colors. But today, it felt like a courtroom. The entire neighborhood was there. The board members sat up front, trying to look serious. Karen sat right in the middle, arms crossed, a stack of printed evidence by her side. As soon as the meeting started, she jumped at the chance to speak. She painted me as some kind of neighborhood hacker, a man obsessed with bringing down the HOA, desperate for revenge. Every word she spoke felt like poison spreading through the room. I could see people glancing my way, whispering, shifting in their seats. But I didn't flinch. I just waited. When it was finally my turn to respond, I stood up slowly and placed a small flash drive on the table in front of the board. I told them I had something they needed to see, something that might change the entire story. The room fell silent as the footage played. On the projector screen, there it was, clear, high-definition video from my security camera. The timestamp matched the night before the fake evidence appeared. Tyler sneaking into my yard, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, the USB drive in his hand. The moment he crouched by my electrical box, the moment Karen's voice called from across the yard, telling him to hurry. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's confident smirk vanished almost instantly. Her face went pale. Her son, sitting near the back, froze completely. One of the board members paused the video and looked straight at her. Another started whispering something into the president's ear. And just like that, the entire narrative shifted. I explained everything. How I'd been accused unfairly, how my network had been tampered with, how the fake logs could only exist if someone had planted them. I showed the router data, the timestamps, the access points. Every single piece lined up perfectly. The room that once looked at me with suspicion was now staring at Karen like she'd just confessed to a crime. But Karen, being who she was, didn't give up easily. She tried to spin it, claiming her son was checking something, that maybe I had set him up. But it was too late. The evidence was too clear, too specific, too detailed to be dismissed. The board ended the meeting abruptly, saying they would review the matter internally. But everyone in that room already knew the truth. As people left, I could feel the shift in energy. The same neighbors who had been avoiding me now gave small nods of apology. A few whispered that they knew something was off. And Karen? She walked out quickly, pulling her son by the arm, her head lowered for once. I thought it would end there, that exposing the truth would be enough, but I underestimated just how deep her pride ran. The next day, I woke up to find something strange in my mailbox, a letter from the HOA, claiming that while I was no longer under suspicion, the board had decided to review my security system compliance. In other words, Karen had found another way to keep me tangled in HOA nonsense. It was her way of saving face. But what she didn't realize was that the board had also started looking into her. They had questions about her access to HOA emails, her permissions, and whether she had allowed her son to use her login. And when those questions started rolling in, the truth would finally come crashing down. Because soon, the same HOA that had once sided with her would be turning against her completely, and I was more than ready to watch her empire of lies collapse piece by piece. In the days that followed the HOA meeting, everything in the neighborhood felt tense. The calm that usually came after a scandal didn't show up this time. Instead, it was like everyone was walking on glass, waiting for the next shock to hit. Karen had gone unusually quiet, and for once, her porch, normally a hotspot for gossip sessions, stayed empty. I knew something was happening behind the scenes. You could feel it. The HOA board had launched a private investigation into how those emails were leaked in the first place, and word was spreading that they were focusing on Karen's access. After all, she was the only one who regularly handled community newsletters, event reminders, and resident contact lists, all managed through the same email system that got leaked. I wasn't supposed to know about the investigation, but in neighborhoods like ours, nothing stays secret for long. A few people quietly reached out to tell me that the board had found irregular login records tied directly to Karen's HOA account. The timestamps matched the exact days the leaked screenshots were taken. It was all finally catching up to her, and the best part? She couldn't talk her way out this time. Over the next week, I saw her house transform from the loudest on the block to the quietest. No more morning gossip with neighbors, no more shouting from her driveway. Even her husband, who usually pretended to ignore everything, started coming home later and later. Tyler barely left the house. I'd catch glimpses of him pacing in his room through the window blinds, his once smug expression replaced by guilt and panic. The HOA board scheduled another meeting, this time for official disciplinary review. The message sent to homeowners was short, sterile, and vague, but everyone knew who it was about. You could see it in the way people talked about it during their morning walks or while raking their lawns. The story that started with me being accused of hacking was about to end exactly where it should have, with the real culprits under the spotlight. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early, mostly out of curiosity. I didn't plan to speak. I didn't need to. My part was already done. All I had to do was watch it unfold. Karen came in late. Gone was her usual confidence, no big gestures, no loud hellos. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the past few weeks had finally caught up with her. Tyler followed behind, head down, his hoodie pulled tight. They sat in the back, away from the other board members. The room was packed again, just like last time, but this time people weren't whispering about me. They were whispering about her. When the meeting started, the board president wasted no time. They went over the digital records, the access logs, and the internal audit findings. The conclusion was clear. The leaked emails had come from Karen's personal HOA credentials. Her account had been used multiple times outside of normal hours from her home IP address. There was no hacking involved, no external breach, just misuse of privileges. And then came the final blow, the part I had secretly been waiting for. The forensic tech team hired by the HOA confirmed that someone on Karen's home network had exported files directly from the shared inbox and took screenshots before deleting traces from the computer. What they didn't know was that Tyler had synced those files with a cloud storage account registered under his own email, one that had automatically backed up everything. That's how they caught him. It wasn't just her access, it was her son's activity that tied the entire leak together. The audit trail showed everything, the login, the screenshots, even the timestamps matching the night he was caught on my security camera sneaking into my yard. The moment they said it, the entire room shifted. Heads turned toward the back row where Karen and Tyler sat. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. Just sat there, her hands gripping the sides of her chair, her face drained of color. For years, she had built herself up as the perfect neighbor, the one who enforced the rules, tattled on others, and pretended to protect the community. But now everyone saw her for what she really was. The source of the chaos she claimed to prevent. The board formally stripped her of her volunteer position, revoked her access to all HOA systems, and issued an official notice of misconduct. They said the matter might even be turned over to local authorities if further violations were found. When the meeting ended, no one clapped. No one cheered. They just quietly got up and left, leaving Karen and her son sitting there, staring at the floor. As I walked out, I caught a glimpse of her through the glass door. The same woman who once accused me of being a criminal now looked like she was living her own punishment. And to be honest, that was enough for me. Over the following weeks, things slowly went back to normal. The neighborhood found a new rhythm, quieter, calmer, freer. Without Karen's constant meddling, people actually talked to each other again. The board even started making fairer decisions. It was strange, almost peaceful. But Karen's reputation never recovered. People stopped trusting her. She tried to act like nothing had happened, watering her lawn, waving half-heartedly. But the damage was permanent. The gossip circle she once controlled now excluded her entirely. Even her best allies in the HOA began keeping their distance. Her son, from what I heard, faced his own consequences. The school found out about the email breach, and he was temporarily suspended for unauthorized computer use. It wasn't jail, but it was enough to make him realize that actions have real consequences. Sometimes I'd catch her glancing toward my house, like she wanted to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe an excuse, but she never did. And I never needed her to, because in the end, I learned something important. In neighborhoods like ours, people like Karen thrive on control. They twist stories, play the victim, and convince others to turn against you. But the truth always finds a way out. It just takes patience, evidence, and a little quiet resolve. One evening, months later, as the sun dipped low over the rooftops and the air finally felt light again, I stood on my porch, looking out over the same street where everything had started. For the first time in a long time, it actually felt like home again. No whispers, no false accusations, no more being the villain in someone else's fantasy, just peace. And maybe that was the real revenge. Not seeing Karen punished, but knowing I'd gotten my life and my reputation back on my own terms. Because in this neighborhood, truth might take its time, but it always wins in the end.